I started this project last December, which puts me at about 9 months start to finish. Well, this baby's finally ready for paint and parts. In this video, I'll add frame saver, cold blue the entire frame, then prime and paint the front end. Since it's a steel frame, I add frame saver to the inside of the tubes. If I was getting it professionally painted, I'd do this step after the paint is done, but since I'll be painting it myself and not curing the paint with heat, I'll do the frame saver first. Frame saver can get messy when it drains out of the vent holes, and I don't want it to mess up my DIY paint job. After spraying all the front triangle tubes, I plug the openings and move on to the rear triangle. Then all the rear vent holes get plugged, and I give the frame a spin for a while to get the insides of the tubes coated. Once all the excess frame saver is drained out, I can shine the frame with some emery cloth. The tubes are all pretty easy to clean up, but for the yoke I had used the Dremel. These abrasive pad wheels make the job relatively quick, but they also make a big mess. Safety glasses and a respirator are a must. I made these frame plug mounts during my previous frame project. The top plug goes in the head tube, and the other's for the bottom bracket shell. They allow me to hang the frame from the bottom or the front of the frame, and they give me something sturdy to grab onto when the frame is covered in wet paint. Before bluing the frame, I wipe it down with isopropyl and a clean rag. Then I start applying the bluing solution. I recently did a video on applying cold bluing and paint to steel. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link to the video in the description. The bluing solution chemically changes the surface of the steel, and it's pretty nasty stuff, so I'm wearing gloves and a respirator. I also have a waterproof drop cloth to catch all the drips. The chemicals are fairly toxic, the process is kind of messy, but it's also really quick. If I'm just bluing and oiling a frame, I can go from bare steel to a finished frame in one day. After I wipe off the excess bluing solution, I spray it with water and wipe it down again. Here I'm smoothing out the finish with a Scotch-Brite pad. Then I repeated the whole process and did a second coat off camera. And lastly, I did a quick third coat on the rear of the bike. The nice thing about bluing is that it's essentially dimensionless. So the important dimensions on the rear end, like the dropouts and the brake mount, aren't changed like they would be with paint. Before applying the primer, I added tape where I wanted the fades to end, and then wiped down the front end with isopropyl. I don't know what it is about painting, but I tend to just jump into it without much of a plan. I don't know if it's the fact that I'm close to the end of the project and I just want to be done, or if it's that I don't really know what I'm doing, so I just kind of wing it. If I would just put some thought into it, do the annoying prep work, make a plan and stick to it, everything would have turned out a lot better. But that's not how it went. Like I said, I put tape on the top and down tubes to mark where I wanted the primer fade to end, and then proceeded to paint right up to the tape. So then I had to remove the tape and move the fade further down. Then you'll probably notice all the overspray on the C-tube and the rear triangle because I didn't bother taping off the rear end. Then what you can't see is me putting the primer on too thick and getting drips on both the down tube and top tube. So after all that work, I scraped the primer back toward the head tube, sanded down the drips, removed the overspray with a Scotch-Brite pad, and put another coat of bluing solution on the rear of the frame. When I was doing this, I noticed the aluminum scraper I was using didn't actually scratch the blued surface, and the uneven transition from the primer to bluing looked kind of cool. So I decided instead of a fade, I'd do a scraped edge. So next, I masked and covered the rear of the frame and applied a few thin coats of primer. Which brings us to what I have here. Everything's all ready for some color. I did a rough measurement and a quick spray to mark where I wanted the fades. I did a couple thin coats a few minutes apart and made sure to keep the blue fade a good distance from the edge of the primer. And the paint is finally done. I have to admit it's a big relief to have this step of the process completed. Just a little cleanup and it'll be ready for parts. The head tube and bottom bracket show plugs come off, then I peel the head badge. I didn't bother being super careful when I masked the head badge. It's okay if the tape job is a bit sloppy, as long as the tape doesn't stick out past the edge of the copper. Any extra paint gets filed off when I clean up the head badge. Then just a little paint to remove on the ends of the head tube, and some extra fine steel wool and 800 grit sandpaper to smooth some gritty spots. Sometimes sprayed out bike can go on powdery and get a bit of a texture when there's overspray. Once I get the seat post in the frame, I'm ready to remove the rest of the masking. The tape leaves a bit of an edge, so I smooth it out with some clean, extra fine steel wool. Using an aluminum strip as a scraper, I put a jagged edge on the primer. I'm going to come back and do some additional scraping. I think it'll look better with a more jagged edge with deeper scrapes. Then I repeat the same process on the down tube. last thing to do is to take some extra fine steel wool to the rear of the frame to smooth out the bluing. And there it is. My new mountain bike frame is done and ready for parts. I still need to oil the blued portion of the frame, but that's just a matter of spraying some Gibbs lubricant on a rag, wiping it on the blued frame, letting it sit for a while, and wiping off the excess. In the next video, I'll get the bike built up and take it for a quick spin. If you want to see how the bike turns out, be sure and hit the like and subscribe buttons so you'll see the next video when it's published. If you're enjoying this video series, consider a super thanks. And if you haven't watched the other videos in the series, go check them out. Thanks for watching, take care, see you next time.